first glance.
It really is a fascinating paradox.
Yeah, so Sweden is dealing with this declining birth rate.
Uh-huh.
But at the same time, they have a high rate of IVF.
Right.
So people are really putting in the effort and resources
Yeah.
to create life, but then you also have
Mhm.
a significant number of abortions happening at the same time.
Right.
It's like this push and pull in opposite directions when it comes to
Yeah.
bringing new life into the world.
It really makes you question what's driving these choices that
I-
seem to be conflicting, especially since the source points out some
Yeah.
pretty stark statistics.
Yeah. What were some of the...
Almost 100,000 births in 2024. Yet over 30,000 abortions in the same year.
Wow.
And on top of that, thousands of embryos are created through IVF.
Okay.
But only a fraction of those actually become babies.
Whoa.
The rest are either frozen indefinitely or ultimately discarded.
So from what I'm gathering from the source, it seems like
Yeah.
Planned Parenthood seems to be a key factor at play here.
Yes.
It's almost like there's this societal expectation in Sweden that
Right.
you'll carefully consider and plan when and if you have children.
Yeah, that's a key point that the source highlights,
Okay.
is this idea of choice and control over reproduction.
Okay.
And Sweden's system definitely facilitates that with its high level of personal autonomy and
Right.
readily available contraception.
So it's not just about having the option to choose. It's almost like there's this
Yeah.
cultural emphasis on making a deliberate, calculated decision about parenthood.
Exactly. And that seems to be reflected in the psychological differences.
Okay.
The source discusses between IVF pregnancies and unplanned pregnancies.
Yeah.
With IVF, you're often talking about a long, emotionally challenging and
Right.
financially demanding process.
Yeah.
People who go through it are usually deeply invested and
Yeah.
prepared for parenthood.
So IVF represents a very
Yes.
intentional act of creation.
Yes.
But then on the flip side, unplanned pregnancy may not fit into
Exactly.
a person's life at that particular moment,
Yeah.
leading them to make
Mhm.
very different choices.
That's right. And it raises some really complex questions about
Yeah.
how we value life at its earliest stages.
Exactly.
With IVF, you have the potential for many embryos being created,
Mhm.
but only a select few are actually implanted.
It almost feels like those embryos are entered into a lottery,
Right.
and only a small percentage actually get the winning ticket
Yeah.
to develop.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder about the ethical implications of
Yeah.
creating so many embryos,
Right.
knowing that many won't be given the chance to develop.
It definitely raises some profound questions, especially when you consider the source's observation that factors like economics, emotional stability, personal goals
Right.
are now heavily influencing reproductive decisions.
So it's not just about biology anymore. It's about timing.
Exactly.
It's about resources. It's
Okay.
about
Mm-hmm.
achieving certain milestones in life before bringing a child into the picture.
Yes.
But what happens when those personal goals and aspirations come
Yeah.
at the expense of potential human life?
That's the heart of the paradox the source is exploring.
Right.
The source notes if all the terminated pregnancies had continued,
Mhm.
Sweden's birth rate would look quite different.
Wow.
It suggests that while choice and control are important,
Mm-hmm.
they also need to be balanced with a sense of responsibility for the potential life
Okay.
that's being created and the long-term consequences
Right.
of our decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like we're moving towards this more like individualistic
Yeah.
approach to family planning.
Definitely. And while the source doesn't explicitly take a stance,
Right.
it makes me wonder, about the potential downsides of this
Yeah.
individualistic focus. What happens when personal choice overshadows
Mm-hmm.
everything else, including, potentially the value
Right.
of a nascent human life?
That's a profound question, and one the source subtly hints at.
Okay.
One point it raises is that this laser focus on individual circumstances might be contributing to Sweden's demographic challenges.
Okay.
If fewer people choose to have children because the timing isn't perfect,
Right.
or they prioritize their careers,
Uh-huh.
it could have serious long-term consequences for the country as a whole.
It's like we're facing this societal dilemma of like having it all,
Yeah.
but on a much grander scale.
Right.
It makes you think, is something fundamental being lost
Mm-hmm.
in the pursuit of individual fulfillment?
Yeah.
Especially when the source is highlighting these
Right.
stark figures about, births and abortions
Yeah.
occurring side by side.
Right, and the source touches on the potential psychological and emotional toll
Yeah.
these decisions can take.
Right, like choosing to pursue IVF or opting for an abortion.
Exactly.
These are life-altering choices that
Yeah.
carry significant weight.
Especially in a society where there's so much emphasis on making the right decision.
Right.
I imagine the pressure to make the choice that aligns with societal expectations
Yeah.
while also navigating personal desires and circumstances
Yeah.
must be immense.
Absolutely. And the source doesn't shy away from
Yeah,
the broader societal impact of these trends.
that's right.
If we're increasingly viewing embryos as something to be created, selected,
Mm.
and even discarded,
Yes,
it raises questions about our respect for human life in general.
that's a weighty observation.
Yeah, it's like we're moving towards this
Right.
more utilitarian view of life,
Yeah.
where its value is measured by its perceived usefulness
Mhm.
or convenience at a given time.
Precisely, and
Yeah.
that brings up serious ethical considerations. If an embryo is deemed undesirable due to genetic factors,
Right.
or simply because it's not the right time,
Yeah.
does that diminish its inherent value as a potential human life?
The source really forces you to grapple with
Yes,
these complex ethical questions.
it does.
It challenges us to examine our beliefs about the beginnings of life
Yeah.
and the moral implications of having so much control over reproduction.
And it pushes us to consider whether this emphasis on individual choice
Right.
is truly leading us towards a more compassionate and just society,
Yeah.
or if we're losing sight of something fundamental along the way.
It's like we're walking this tightrope between personal autonomy
Yes.
and our shared responsibility to safeguard those who are most vulnerable.
Uh-huh.
In this case, that vulnerability extends to the very beginning of life.
And the source doesn't offer simple answers.
Right.
It presents us with the realities of this reproductive paradox
Uh,
and challenges us to wrestle with the ethical and societal ramifications.
which is precisely what makes this deep dive so compelling.
I agree.
It's crucial to have these conversations,
Yeah.
even when they delve into uncomfortable or challenging territory.
We need to be aware of the complexities and potential consequences of these reproductive choices, both for individuals and for the future of our society.
This deep dive has really taken us to the core of some incredibly complex issues.
It really has.
You know, we've talked about individual choices,
Yeah.
societal pressures,
Yeah.
the ethical considerations surrounding both IVF and abortion.
Right.
But what does it all really mean?
Yeah.
What are we supposed to take away from all of this?
Well, I think the source is urging us to move beyond
Okay.
simply accepting these trends as the new normal.
Okay.
It's calling for a deeper examination of the values
Right.
we want to uphold as a society and the kind of future
Mhm.
we envision for ourselves and generations to come.
So it's a call to action then,
Exactly.
to not shy away from these difficult questions, but
Right.
to really grapple with them.
To acknowledge that while these are deeply personal choices,
Yeah.
they have ripple effects that extend far beyond the individual.
Mm-hmm.
There's a collective responsibility to consider the implications
Yeah.
of widespread IVF,
Mm-hmm.
use the prevalence of abortion,
Right.
and how these trends intersect with a declining birth rate.
It's about striking a balance when you
Oh,
say,
absolutely.
between individual autonomy and a sense of shared responsibility
Yes.
for the well-being of our society and perhaps even for the future of humanity.
Absolutely. And that balance is something we need to be actively and thoughtfully discussing.
Yeah, like what kind of society do we want to be?
Exactly.
One that prioritizes individual choice above all else,
Yeah.
even when it potentially comes at the cost of human life,
Right.
or one that seeks to uphold the value of every human being
Yes.
from the very beginning.
Those are some incredibly thought-provoking questions.
Yeah.
And I think the source is intentionally leaving us with those questions rather than offering easy answers.
Yeah, it's pushing us to confront the realities
Yes.
of this reproductive paradox
Right.
and to engage in open, honest, sometimes uncomfortable
Right.
dialogues about its implications.
It's a challenge to move beyond statistics and trends
Yeah.
and to really delve into the human element of this situation,
Mm-hmm.
to recognize the weight of these choices, both for the individuals
Right.
making them and for our society as a whole.
Because ultimately, the future of humanity hinges on how we navigate
Exactly.
these complex and often challenging questions about the creation and
Yes.
protection of life.
Well, that's a pretty powerful thought to leave our listeners with.
It is, isn't it? It speaks to the heart of this reproductive paradox.
Mm-hmm.
In a world where we have the power to both create and end life,
Yes.
what does it truly mean to value human existence, especially
Yeah.
at its most vulnerable stage?
A question worth pondering for sure. To our listeners,
Yes.
we encourage you to continue exploring these complex issues.
Yep.
It's a conversation that requires all of our voices
Yeah.
and perspectives. Until next time, keep diving deep.
See you next time.